narratives are running rampant right now. So which ones do we believe? Which ones maybe is a better question to ask? Which ones should we not believe? We'll unpack it today here live on Radio Row at SEC Media Days. Last day, best day, going to finish through the tape. It is Thursday, July 18th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. Glad to have y'all dialed in. We got Trey, the man, the myth, the legend, entity, off to my right. We have a ton to talk about. LSU, just very quietly during media days, gets themselves a 5-star plus corner in DJ Pickett. Huge win for Brian Kelly, and that kind of got the gears turning for me a little bit. There's been, I think, far too much Brian Kelly slander, not just over the last 6 months. I'm talking about really since he got the job at LSU, which when you look at his resume and his track record over his time being a college football coach, much less at LSU, doesn't really add up to me. So we'll talk about that. Florida, they were here at SEC Media yesterday. We were fortunate enough to sit down with quarterback Graham Mertz, and y'all, I went into that excited to talk to him, obviously, because he's the quarterback of the University of Florida. But I left that conversation being like, okay, if that guy's running the offense, Florida's in good hands. Grown up, adult, confident, comfortable in his own skin, played a lot of college football. It reflected in that conversation. Excited for y'all to hear that. But Billy Napier made headlines yesterday when he was asked about his job security. And like when you come to a situation like this where we're just talking for really more or less 4 days, of course that's going to be something that we're asking about. And I thought his answer was interesting. Andy Staples talked about it a little bit on his show this morning. He said, you know, to a degree we're on schedule. I think a lot of Florida folks like, on schedule? Brother, 5-7 in year 2 is not on schedule. So I think there's more to that discussion than maybe what was said. So we'll talk about that. What's the outlook for Alabama? For me yesterday, it really hit me when Kelly DeBoer took the podium as the head coach at Alabama and not Nick Saban. That was a little bit weird, kind of like a mouthwash and orange juice, but nonetheless, we press on. We'll talk about the outlook for Bama in 2024 and beyond. And then finally, we'll finish this thing up, sticking with narrative season, sticking with keep your head on the swivel season. What are some things that maybe aren't being said? Now, they're not being said probably for 2 reasons. 1, they're unlikely to happen. Or 2, because maybe they are going to happen. That'll make a lot more sense when we get there. But we're glad to have you all a part of this, man. I say it every single show. This is supposed to be, for y'all that are watching or listening on podcast, a break, a reprieve from the normal life, because there's a lot that goes on in your life. You have kids, you have work, you have friends. You got a lot on your plate. College football, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions that are behind this show, the greatest thing on the face of the planet. So for the next hour or so, we're just talking ball. We are so close to the 2024 season getting rolling. Let's get right to it, man. What are some narratives in 2024 that we just quite frankly aren't buying? There's a lot of things that are said this time of year, and some of them are said out of good faith. Some of them are said out of the effort to get clicks. But what are some things that are being said that, again, they kind of create a narrative that we're just not on board with? And the first one that I think needs to be addressed is that Alabama somehow isn't still going to be Alabama. All right? Now, Nick Saban, it's very true. He is no longer the head coach there. It's been well documented, not just throughout the course of this week with him not getting or not having credentials to walk into SEC Media Days on Radio Row, which is essentially Fort Knox if you don't have your credentials, but also over the course of, I guess, really since he retired. Like, it's been a talking point for a very, very long time. But here's the deal, man. Nick Saban, as good a coach as he is, and he's the greatest of all time, undisputed. Did he make any plays at Alabama? Did he throw any touchdowns? Did he make any interceptions? No, right? So what did Nick Saban do that was really what allowed them to be so successful? Recruited at a high level. That's obvious. Game planned at a really high level. Adapted with the game. The biggest thing that I think he brought to Alabama, which is hard to really pinpoint one, but if I had to pick one, it would be the standard setting. And when I look at the intensity internally at Alabama, from what we can gauge, seeing Jalen Milroe during that spring football game throw his helmet, and again, spring football game now, it's like a glorified scrimmage. You're not really showing too much, but he was pissed. He was upset with their execution that last drive, and he's the starting quarterback. He's not battling for his job, but he was upset with what they had done on that final drive, which is one instance, you're kind of getting a peek into the house via the window instead of actually being in the house, to kind of refer to what Dan Lanning says about how we view football teams. But I think that point stands the same. Jalen Milroe And I would say overall feeling within that operation Tuscaloosa is still dialed into their championship standard that Nick Saban installed, and I think Kelly and DeBoer is going to work to uphold. So the idea that Bama is not still going to be Bama, I have a hard time getting behind that. One more thing I'll say here, all those players that Nick Saban brought to Alabama, a lot of them are still there. Now, some of them, especially on the defensive side of the football, haven't played quite as much ball, but doesn't mean they don't still have a whole lot of stars next to their name. So Alabama not still being Alabama, I'm not calling my shot to win the national championship right now, but to say they're not going to factor in, I think is a wild narrative that isn't getting too much traction, but it is getting some airtime. We don't buy that narrative. Bama, I think, will still be Bama in 2024. Now, here's another narrative, that Texas is in for a rude awakening in the SEC. And this is usually coming from like the SEC home turfers, is what I like to refer to this group as. Folks that really, instead of being worried about their football team, are more worried about the patch they get to wear on their jersey or the sticker on the back of the helmet that says SEC. Like, they stand behind that logo as opposed to their own team's logo. And I think it's honestly kind of an ignorance is bliss situation, because if you actually look at what Texas has on the roster and what they did a season ago, and quite frankly, what they did in Tuscaloosa, Alabama last year, that myself and Trey Hannity saw live in living color, like, Texas is not in for a rude awakening. Now, will they dominate the SEC? I don't think that's necessarily something that you would aspire to your first day there. But Steve Sarkisian kind of echoed that same sentiment yesterday when he took the podium at Media Days. He said, for us, it's about respect. Like, we want to respect this conference. We want to respect everyone that is a part of this operation. We want to respect how competitive this league has been. But at the exact same time, they need to respect us. And so I think that's kind of the mantra for Texas from an internal standpoint and from a fan base level. And we talked to Jahdae Barron yesterday on this show, and we'll likely get that conversation to you here in the coming weeks. But the overall, I guess, attitude for him was like Texas was not satisfied with last year. And if you're a Texas fan, that should fire you up, because in some way, shape, or form, you could pitch the idea to me of, well, Texas, they got to the mountaintop of the Big 12, they got to the college football playoff. They had a lot of folks grabbing microphones saying Texas is back. Great. Okay, you can rest on your laurels there, right? No, I think this team wants to do more than that, and I'm excited to see what they do. Will they win the SEC? Again, I'm not calling my shot right now. We're going to do that here in the coming weeks, but I do think that when you talk about Texas going forward, they will be a top-tier team in the SEC. So I think there's a split opinion on Texas. Some think they're going to be in Atlanta. Some think that they're going to just be absolutely body-bagged. I have a hard time getting behind the latter there. I think Texas will factor into the SEC title race without a shadow of a doubt. Now, speaking of factoring into the SEC title race, this is another one that I think isn't getting enough love, or maybe a narrative that's getting too much love, is that LSU is somehow going to go quietly into that good night, and they won't factor into the SEC championship race. Currently in Vegas, LSU has the 5th best odds to win the SEC. I'm looking at Trey Hannity off camera. 5th best odds to win the SEC. Now, I'm not telling you that's an incorrect place to have them right now. There's a lot of good teams in the conference, but I mean, you're telling me 5th best odds? 5th, I mean, what that's telling me is you don't think LSU will factor in. And that's fine. Believe what you want to believe. But to me, to make that kind of a bet is betting against Brian Kelly in year 3. There's several things in the sports world that would make me concerned if I were on the other side of the field. And that was probably Carmelo Anthony when he had the hoodie on. Like, hoodie Melo is a dangerous thing. Kyrie Irving, untucked jersey would make me nervous. And Brian Kelly in year 3. Year 3, Brian Kelly is a dangerous thing. He has proven on many occasions that he is in his bag in year 3. That's when his team really becomes his team, for lack of a better phrase. Year 3 at Cincinnati, we've said it many times, made a BCS bowl when Cincinnati was a G5 school. Year 3 at Notre Dame, made the national championship. Year 3 at LSU, to assume they're not going to factor into the SEC title race, I think is just ridiculous. Look at the slate they have, not horrible. You got Ole Miss and Bama both in Baton Rouge. You go to Death Valley, anything can happen. And then on the road, you got some tricky ones at A&M and at Florida. But overall, like, the draw isn't horrible if you're an LSU Tiger fan. So they will factor into the SEC title race. I said on the show with Matt Moscona yesterday, I think 10-2 is very attainable for them. And 10-2, just so we're all keeping track, gets you in the college football playoff, in a vacuum at least. So we'll see what happens there. Another narrative we don't buy, man, we just kind of look at, we laugh, we chuckle, that Auburn's going to stay bad on offense. The people that say Auburn's going to be bad on offense again in 2024, that take, I would have to imagine if you said, well, hey, why do you believe that? Well, they would probably start their sentence with something like this. Well, Peyton Thorne, and you can cut him off right there. You say Peyton Thorne? You mean the guy who didn't get spring practice last year? Peyton Thorne, the guy who got there with like 10 minutes to spare and said, hey, learn everybody's names, and oh, yeah, you're going to start at quarterback for us? Is that really fair? Is that really fair? I think where I'm sitting right now, there's a lot more reasons to believe that Auburn will be substantially improved on offense than there is to believe they're going to be bad. Because you look at the one reason of why you would say Auburn's not going to be successful on offense. You say Peyton Thorne. That's fine. That's one take. That's one person. That's your prerogative. But I'm looking at the mountains of reasons for why Auburn will be improved on offense, and the first is Hugh Freeze. Like last year, Hugh Freeze's offense, that was as bad a unit as he's had in his career as a head coach. In his career, he's coached a lot of football now. To assume they're not going to get back to maybe the trend that he's had over the course of his entire career in college football, to me, that makes no sense. Peyton Thorne gets spring practice. I've said that ad nauseum, but also he gets a walkie-talkie in the helmet, and also he gets some weapons to throw the football to, and he gets a Hugh Freeze offense as opposed to being like a Hugh Freeze, Philip Montgomery hybrid offense. There's a reason there's not two captains of a boat. There's a reason there's not two presidents of the United States. Usually you got to have one voice. If you have two voices, it gets confusing. All right? So to have some unison, some alignment, that's going to be massive. I have a hard time buying that Auburn's going to stay as bad as they were last year on offense. Now, what does that mean for them in the win-loss column? I don't know, but I think it's a lot closer to 8 wins than it is 6 wins. Last one here, and this is one that's kind of fun to talk about because A&M's at Media Days today. This is one that has probably persisted from a narrative standpoint, not just this season, not just this Media Days, but really for the better part of the last couple of years. And the narrative is that A&M should temper expectations. A&M is an entitled fan base. A&M is this, A&M is that. A&M every single year, they got all this hype, and then they underperform. Full transparency. The last 2 seasons, we have picked A&M to go 8-4. They went 5-7. We picked A&M to go 7-5. The next year, they went 7-5. So we are not drinking the A&M Kool-Aid nationally like I think maybe a lot of folks would accuse others of. Like we check the comment section every time we post a YouTube video, and we see folks say, I've heard this guy say it's about A&M before. I don't think so. I haven't. I mean, I'm just going to say I don't think those are the same videos that we're looking at here. The narrative going back to this is that they are entitled. They should be national champs. They should be this. They should be that. And I'm not telling you that A&M is going to win the SEC. I'm not telling you A&M is going to be the national champions. But to tell A&M fans that they need to turn their expectations knob down quite a bit, to me, I don't think is totally fair because in college football, one, have not does not mean cannot. Also, you talk about A&M, input really should equate to output. You look at the input for A&M, I understand a lot of guys transferred out from some of those high-profile classes, but there's still a lot of talent on that roster from the way they've recruited. They still hit the portal pretty effectively. Grabbing Nick Scorton from Purdue is going to be a massive get for them. They still have, I believe, a sneaky good wide receiver room with Noah Thomas and Moose Muhammad. They got a good backfield. Like, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of input on this roster. To me, that can make them really successful in 2024. I do think when you talk about A&M, it is bake over microwave when you talk about Mike Elko. And I said this on Texags yesterday when I was sitting down with David Nuno, like, when you saw Nebraska last year with Matt Rule, the thing that we said a lot with them is culture, toughness, structure. That's going to benefit Nebraska. That's the same way I feel about Mike Elko at Texas A&M. Those things, though, you don't necessarily flip the switch. You don't hit the 1-minute express on the microwave and you have it working right away. It takes some time typically for a team to adapt a coach's persona, way of doing things, to be a Mike Elko coached football team. And so the point I'm trying to make here is if they do buy in quicker than the average team, A&M is going to be really hard to beat. A&M is going to be probably in that range of a 9-win football team. So the idea that A&M's entitled or they have expectations that are too high, of course, there's always that 15 to 10% of a fan base that is unrealistic. But I think A&M fans, for the most part, are really just tracking the input. They get to the output, and they're like, wait, this equation does – someone check the math here. I don't think the A&M fans are crazy. I don't think that they're delusional. I think that the input hasn't equated to the output just yet, but I don't think that means it won't at some point in time. So let me know the narratives that you're not buying when it comes to the SEC in 2024. A lot of narratives right now. Got to keep the head on a swivel. We're going to do it together. I'm excited to hear what y'all think. Also, if you're tuned in live right now, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I should have said that at the top of this show, but man, on the podcast and on the YouTube channel, y'all have been crushing it. Subscribe to the feed, like the video, all that stuff. It helps us do more of what you want to see. So thank you in advance for that. As I mentioned at the top of the show, man, I am not alone here on Radio Row. I got the man punching the show live, making it all happen, and that's Trey the Manatee Yanity. What's up, baby? How we living?
Oh, what a nickname, JD. I've never heard that one, and it's one of my new favorites. What a week we've had.
It's been fun.
JD. I mean, it's been so much fun. It's been so quick, too. It's already the very last day. We've heard about how Horns Down is going to be okay this year, and about how Georgia is going to be, finding their players based off of NIL if they do speed or get in trouble with that kind of stuff. We've heard a lot about how Florida is right on schedule, according to their head football coach.
How about that?
And you know what? I think the biggest headline of them all, Graham Mertz, all SEC juggling. Maybe the best juggler in the entire SEC. So it's been a fun week, JD. A lot of big-time moments here, and this is day number 4 now. This is our last day, and I think this is the danger zone of SEC Media Days because everybody's feeling loose. Maybe our questions are a little bit spicier today from our fellow media members, and we get some good responses. But overall, another excellent SEC Media Days, a bigger one with 16 teams now, and just a whole lot of fun.
A smoke them if you got them kind of vibe on Radio Row is what you're saying.
Exactly.
A little more YOLO vibe to our colleagues. I like that. I like that a lot. Here's a question for you, Trey, unrelated to the rest of the show. We've done a ton of interviews. You have run a lot of interviews in tandem with River Bailey on Andy Staples' show as well, which if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, another reason to do so because his show is every single morning, every single weekday morning, that is, just bangers all the time. Do you have a favorite interview that you have been a part of to this point in SEC Media Days?
Man, and real quick, I got to say, big shout out to our guy River Bailey for always just absolutely murdering the game and killing it again, helping, me as we're remote this week, just doing a monster job as always. And our guy Nick Brick as well there, Jackson Audette, huge commitment last night on our channel. If you haven't seen that yet, DJ Pickett, LSU, Oregon, Miami, go check that out on 3 Recruits. But through all our coverage this week, I'd say my favorite interview, man,
there's been some good ones.
I'd say John Day yesterday from
little John Day Barron. Yeah,
he was
dude.
fired up.
He was juiced, dude.
Some explicit words even, with his thoughts on Texas and where things ended last year and what it's going to be this year. Really just got fired up. I love that. Graham Mertz, you don't necessarily get to see what these players are about when they're playing or when, they're on camera or whatever. But, when you really get to talk to these guys a little bit, what a personality and, just so much fun. A loose guy, and I think that's going to help Florida a lot this year, that they have a veteran quarterback that also feels loose. That's the biggest thing I took from that, and probably all of our interviews this week.
He was so comfortable in his own skin. Like, he acted like a guy that's played a number of years of college football already. He acted like a guy who's been in Media Days before.
Just a regular guy that got really good at football, and it's just having fun. One of us.
One of our guys. Yeah, he's also a college football sicko. That interview is coming a little bit later in the show. So make sure you're dialed in here. Don't go anywhere. We got that conversation coming for you in a second. But Trey, you alluded to a one recruiting win that LSU got last night on the On3 Recruits channel. And that was DJ Pickett, 5-star plus cornerback, giving his pledge to the Tigers. Big time win for BK. And Trey, that got my wheels turning just a little bit here. I think we need to unpack some of this Brian Kelly slander because there's been far too much of it. And we don't stand for it unless, of course, the slander is warranted. Then, you kind of charge the game. But I think for Brian Kelly, man, there's been far too much that's been said about him that just, quite frankly, does not check out. So let's kind of unpack that together right now. All Brian Kelly has done since getting to LSU, from where I'm sitting, is knock out narrative after narrative after narrative. All I've seen him do. Because you got to LSU, does the pep rally. What was the first clip you saw of him? It wasn't saying he was excited to be at LSU. It wasn't him promising to win national championships or anything like that. The first clip that hit the internet that went viral about Brian Kelly was him at the basketball game, or on a basketball court, rather, in front of the crowd saying, me and my family, and people the internet is merciless, dude. Internet is merciless. And they jumped on him and said, this guy's not a fit. This is a wannabe Southerner. He's faking it. This is not going to work. He's not a fit. And since then, let's check the resume here. Brian Kelly A guy that's not a fit in the SEC has beat Nick Saban his first year on the job, made it to the SEC championship game when there was divisions, and in 2 years has 2 10-win seasons. Last year had a Heisman Trophy winner playing quarterback for him. Looks like he's a fit okay to me. Looks like he's fitting in just fine so far in Baton Rouge. Then the next narrative that we heard a lot of, even when he got that job, was, hey, he's not going to recruit. This came just to call a spade here. The volume was pretty loud in South Bend, Indiana about what he wasn't going to do on the recruiting trail, or maybe what he would refuse to do on the recruiting trail. So far, again, let's check the resume. Last night, 5-star plus corner DJ Pickett. Massive win over a number of other big fish on the recruiting trail. Bryce Underwood, the top player in America, quarterback out of the state of Michigan, committed to LSU. Currently, the 2025 class, LSU has the number 3 class in all the freaking country. Check what he's done so far on the recruiting trail outside of this class. He's got 2 top 10 classes, working on his second top 5 class right now. So if we're just going to be real here, Brian Kelly has been just destroying these narratives left and right. And to me, like, Leonardo DiCaprio and Brian Kelly have a lot in common. Leonardo DiCaprio, if he's in a movie, the floor is going to be pretty high. Like, is it going to win an Oscar? Is it going to be, the movie of the summer? Sometimes, yes, but oftentimes it's going to be just a really good movie, and you'll leave that movie and say, wow, I enjoyed that, mostly because of what Leo DiCaprio brought to the table there. That's Brian Kelly. Universal approval rate, high floor. Everything he touches usually has some improved value after he gets his hands on it. That's Brian Kelly. Now, remember, though, what was the knock on Leo DiCaprio for a long time, man? I had to slack Nick break to make sure I was right on this morning. Didn't have an Oscar. Can he win the big one? That was always the knock. That was the knock that people had for him for a long time. Deserved or undeserved, that was the knock. Brian Kelly hasn't won a natty. Brian Kelly's still searching for his Oscar. But I think even when Leo was going through that stretch where he hadn't won an Oscar, I don't think you could have asked anybody in the film community and said, well, hey, is that going to be a forever thing? Will he ever win an Oscar? I don't think the majority of the people answering that question answered it with a no. I think most people said, yeah, probably a matter of time. Probably got to get the situation right, the circumstances right, the things around him. The stars kind of have to align a little bit. Looking at Brian Kelly at LSU, y'all, LSU, we've said it before, is a rocket ship that's already been to the moon. They've won a national championship with Ed Orgeron and Les Miles. 2 individuals that are phenomenal coaches in their own right based on that hardware, but also Brian Kelly, from a win percentage standpoint, has a better winning percentage than both those individuals. So on paper, I think it's fair to make the argument that the rocket ship that LSU is now has one of the best pilots behind that thing than they've had previously and gone to the moon with. And so you talk about the future for LSU, man, the brand, the resources, the fertile recruiting ground. Talk about the stars aligning. I've said it before. I think it is a matter of when, not if, Brian Kelly wins that national championship. And when he does that, will this slander persist? I don't know. In the social media day and age we're in right now, there's always some slander to be had, regardless of who you are. But I think that would really turn the volume down quite a bit on what he won't do, can't do, isn't a fit for. The whole thing, is he a fit? Is he not a fit? That discussion is always fun to me, because if you succeed at a high level, you're a fit. Like, does not matter. Does not matter. And would I be a fit to go talk about English Premier League soccer? I promise you, no. Don't know the game, not from there, never played the sport. I would not be a fit. But if we were to work our tail off, figure out all those things, embed ourselves in those communities, which would be a lot of work, but we do it, we could probably, I believe, find a way to put together a pretty solid product in the digital media space for English Premier League soccer. I think we would succeed. So would we be a fit on paper? No, but when we start succeeding, at that point, nobody really cares if you're a fit because you're winning. Now, we're not going to do any EPL content anytime soon. I apologize to the folks that were hoping for that. We are exclusively college football, but the point remains the same. Brian Kelly, is he a fit? Is he not a fit? He's a fit. He's a fit because of what he's done from a product standpoint on the recruiting trail and from a wins-loss perspective. That's our piece on that. Trey, what are your takes on the Brian Kelly situation now at LSU? Are you as high on them as I am when it comes to like the long haul for them and hoisting some national championship hardware?
I think that LSU is good of a chance as anybody to do just that, JD. And that's what goes on within the football field. And I don't think Brian Kelly does many wrongs when it comes to football itself, the game of football, recruiting the game of football, coaching the game of football. All of that is incredible. But I don't know how many actors there are in the state of Louisiana, in the Baton Rouge metro area. Whatever the LSU athletic department has to do to find the very best one that looks as close to Brian Kelly as possible to send them to every single event that is non-football related, do that. Louisiana State. From the jump, JD, you talked about it, the basketball thing with the fake Southern accent.
Sure.
The weird spinning video with recruits. That was just the next in line of, wow, this is going to be a disaster at LSU. And then has a lot of success there, has a Heisman winner, it exceeds expectations, and all of a sudden gets here to Dallas for SEC Media Days, and then we're right back to it on social media with ridiculous videos of him riding a bull, so much so that, the top coach in the league, if you want to say that, Kirby Smart, said, there's no chance I get on that bull because I saw the Brian Kelly video. So as far as the football goes, I don't think there's many wrongs. And, the Leonardo DiCaprio didn't win an Oscar for a long time, but ultimately, JD, he did. And Nick's going to probably get upset with me here if I don't say it right. The Revenant or the Reverend?
Yeah, the Revenant. Yeah.
Revenant,
yeah.
He did win an Oscar there. Now, what did it take for Leonardo DiCaprio to win that Oscar, right? I think he had to spend a night inside of a bear carcass was one of the things, had to lay in a frozen river. He did a lot for this movie. My movie fans out there know how much it took to get that Oscar. He did a lot to really, put himself in that role. So is Brian Kelly willing to do that in a football sense? What is sleeping in a bear carcass on a football field mean? Is that, winning against Alabama again? Is that, winning your biggest game on your schedule? Is that the bear carcass for Brian Kelly? Whatever it takes, that Oscar did come for Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think that national title could easily come for Brian Kelly, but you have to sleep in that bear carcass at some point.
I love where you took this conversation. Can I say that? I love where you took this conversation. The bear carcass, as I'm thinking about this, I didn't know that, first of all. So that's really, really interesting.
That might not be a one-for-one fact. It was something like that.
Let's pretend it's factual. I think for him to do that, the bear carcass in my mind is like, can he get a top two class? Because that means you probably had a better class than Alabama or Georgia or whoever number one is who number one is. But you're probably one of the top classes, if not the top class in the SEC, depending on who number one is. That would be now you have more Jimmies and Joes on your roster, at the very least from a depth perspective, right? That'd be my bear carcass for him. What do you think?
I think that's fair. I think that you have to put the guys in place, and we have the LSU top commits up right now. Look at this class, JD. You're talking about the number one quarterback. Obviously, DeCorian Moore was committed to this class at one point. He no longer is, but you still feel so great about what's coming on offense. You have the number one running back in the class. You have a top two cornerback now in DJ Pickett that committed with us last night. Tyler Miller, Carius Kern, you get on the list. This class is loaded. But, as we heard about it a couple days ago, I guess that was Tuesday that LSU joined us here at SEC Media Days. They feel really good about this roster. Obviously, Garrett Nussmeier did not play a lot of football last year, considering the Heisman winner was the quarterback at Louisiana State. But you have a guy that's just so confident, and a guy that I think is a little bit slept on in a sense in Garrett Nussmeier because of what happened last year and because of, what you return at LSU. It's not, a first-round receiver in Malik Neighbors. It's maybe not this guy, this X, this O, but I think you still have a really good offense. And, of course, the biggest piece is you have a much improved defense. You had the Heisman winner last year. You didn't really have a chance because your defense was so poor. Same with 2019 LSU. I think this team maybe isn't the offense of 2019 or the offense of 2023, but you have a much improved defense, which is going to help a lot.
Fingers are crossed on that defense in Baton Rouge, without a doubt. I love what you said about Garrett Nussmeier, though. He's just talking to him, you're like, okay, adult, grown up, handles his business, understands what he's getting into, understands what it is to be the quarterback at LSU. Now, has he done it just yet? Not as a starter, but like you mentioned, the offense last year was so potent, and him getting to study Jaden Daniels and him getting to sit behind him and understand the work it takes to be successful, I think that can only be good things for the folks in Baton Rouge. Trey, I love that from you, brother. I appreciate you adding in the bear carcass take from the Revenant. That's huge. That's huge.
Well, that's Leo, and he doesn't get enough credit for what he went through there.
Yeah, I feel like that should be a more well-known thing, but I digress. So LSU, they were at Media Days earlier this week. Alabama, the Crimson Tide, they were at Media Days yesterday. And I think we got to kind of unpack the outlook for them in 2024, because for me yesterday, and I said this at the top of the show, it really hit me that Nick Saban is no longer Alabama's head coach when Kelly and DeBoer took the podium. That was a pretty surreal moment in a lot of ways. It felt like the official changing of the guard. But nonetheless, man, you look at Alabama and what they have in front of them. Vegas still loves Alabama. They give them the 5th best odds to win the national championship. Now, the Alabama naysayers are saying, well, hey, Saban's not there. They lost a lot of production on defense. I'll just say this. For Alabama, it is a different set of rules you play by when you assess that roster. Like new, a lot of places, or unproven equals, we'll see. At Alabama, there's still some we'll see baked into that, but I think a lot more confidence should be had because of how many stars a lot of those guys have next to their name. I said at the top of the show as well in our Narratives We're Not Buying segment. Did Nick Saban catch any passes? Did Nick Saban throw any touchdowns? Did he make any plays on defense? No, he was the head coach of Alabama. What he brought to the table and what made them so successful from where I'm standing was what he did from a talent acquisition standpoint, from a game plan and adapting to the game kind of standpoint, and probably most importantly, from a standard setting standpoint. And so the question I would have then for Alabama, as Kelly and DeBoer has a different tone of voice when he talks to the media and probably to his football team, period, is, okay, well, is a different level of intensity or a different volume, rather, does that change the standard internally at Alabama? And I had that question really for the better part of the early time when he was hired at Bama, really all the way until spring football. But then we got to that spring game, and I watched Jalen Milroe on that final series of the spring game in a glorified scrimmage where he's not battling for his QB1 job necessarily, be just, furious at the way that drive finished. And it's one instance, you try not to pin too much on one snapshot of a moment, but at the same time, Jalen Milroe throwing his helmet, I was like, man, it's very Saban-esque. That's very reminiscent of those Alabama national championship closing moments where you got the quarterback and the center arguing on the very last drive about snap count or execution or whatever when they're about to win the national championship. Like, they're still pushing for more. And so, again, it's one moment. You're not trying to take too much away from it. But if that is a peek into what Alabama is going to be internally, that temperature is still cranked all the way up to championship level. Now, I think a lot of people, and myself included, had the question early on, well, like, hey, is Kelly DeBoer too normal to be the head coach at Bama? And I don't think it's a fair thought to have it from the jump. But when you start to unpack it a little bit more, like, I think that Kelly DeBoer and his communication style is tailored perfectly to where college football is and where college football is headed. Because where are we right now in this sport? Players, both on your roster and on other rosters, have more options than they've ever had before. Mobility is at an all-time high. And so if you are going to be the military sergeant to me, I might respond well to that. There's also a chance that I don't respond well to that. I think right now in college football, being able to have a dialogue with your players and being able to communicate in a way to where they feel valued and respected, not that Nick Saban didn't do that, I think that matters more than ever before. And I think that's something that Kelly DeBoer, quite frankly, majors in. And Nick Saban even would probably attest to this, and I think has attested to this at different points. He had to adapt his communication style. He had to sort of evolve in that way. And Nick Saban, one of the best evolvers and adapters in the sport, period, had to do that. And so for Kelly DeBoer, the way that he speaks to his players and the way that he communicates, I think that's going to benefit him long term. So the too normal narrative, it's a fair question to have to a degree, but I also think overall, again, it's just going to favor him and benefit him as we move into modern college football. You have to treat your players, quite frankly, like pros. In the NFL, you don't really scream at your players like that. You don't really yell at your players to the same way that you may be used to in college football. And I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. I think a lot of players respond well to volume, but I think that we're trending towards that professional model, professionalization period of college football, and the player-coach communication is another factor that's, I think, going to play into that. Now, you look at Alabama, too. I think one thing that benefits them long-term, too, and benefits them in 2024 is the edge this team has might be a little bit slept on. We talked about it on an Andy Staples show this morning. A lot of these guys, now I'll rephrase that, every one of these guys, according to Jalen Milroe, picked Alabama. Like, they didn't have the Hayes Fawcett graphic the same way that you do when you commit to a school. But when Nick Saban left Alabama, every single one of these players had a chance to leave. And so everyone who's on the roster right now had to recommit to Bama, recommit to Kelly and DeBoer. And so you pair that with the way that last season finished for a lot of these guys on this roster. They've been through some hard things. That final snap in the Rose Bowl, for it to not go the way that you would have liked for it to go and to have some issues getting that execution done, I guarantee you that was heartbreaking. That takes a toll on you. Emotionally, within your team, it takes a toll. Like failing to reach your goals and failure to achieve the ultimate prize, like that's upsetting. That hurts. That can fragment a team a little bit if you don't handle it the right way and you don't have the right standards and way of doing things in-house, in place to deal with that. And so going back to what I was saying, the difficult things they've had to go through has hardened them, I believe. And when you're able to become a hardened organization the way that I believe Alabama is right now, all that breeds for them is going to be poise. It breeds poise. And poise, as we've seen multiple times throughout big games and especially in the national championship / college football playoff kind of setting, that's a difference maker. I mean, look at Michigan last year. They were able to, I think, be so successful in those big games towards the end of the year, especially without their head coach, because of the difficult spots they'd been in previously. J.J. McCarthy, he had played in the college football playoff game before, had struggled, had failed. I think that failure benefited him and the rest of this roster into what they wanted to do in 2023 and ultimately accomplish in 2023. So we look long-term at Alabama. We look long-term at what Kelly DeBoer is going to be there. The metrics for success for him, the key variables, they're the same for him as everyone else in the sport. Can you adapt to where the sport is headed, and can you sustain? Well, you look at what Kelly DeBoer has done so far in college football, 104-12 as a head coach. You don't stumble into that. Like, there's no, there's no asterisk next to 104-12 as your Kelly DeBoer. So in 2024, I said at the top of the show, Bama's still Bama. Now, what does that look like? Remains to be seen. You're going to ask a lot of the defense. That's the major hinge point, I think, for them ultimately winning the SEC in 2024. But to assume they're not still Bama, to assume Kelly DeBoer isn't going to have a really good chance to be successful just because Nick Saban isn't there anymore doesn't mean Bama's not still going to be a force. So the outlook in 2024 for Bama, the goals don't change. Not just from a fan base level with expectations, but I'm talking about long term. I'm talking about at the internal level. This team still expects to compete at the highest level, and the internal temperature, from what I can tell, still reflects that, and that is a good thing for everyone in Tuscaloosa. Trey, now you are a graduate of the University of Alabama, and credit to you. Whenever we have discussions about college football, you are extremely unbiased. So what is your unbiased take on Bama heading into 2024 right now? Anything that you want to get off your chest here on Radio Row?
Well, I mean, yeah, JD, I'm a graduate of Alabama, but I think I'm a student of the game constantly. And this Alabama team's a lot different than the Alabama team that I was around. But obviously, Nick Saban is still around this program to a pretty close degree sometimes. What were our questions about Kelly DeBoer when this move was made? And, we landed, from our trip to Houston. I think this probably happened, the Nick Saban news, maybe 3 or 4 hours after we got back to Nashville. And so it was, gave Alabama a long time to consider who the next coach would be. Dan Lanning wasn't the guy. They made that call. Didn't get a response the right way, obviously. You tested other waters, but Kelly DeBoer was the guy that ultimately was the right fit. That would agree to come to the university. And I think everybody was nervous then. And our guy Tim Watts with Bama Online made a really good point the other day. That was January. Now it's July. If you were going to tell anybody where they'd be at right now back then, this recruiting class, the buzz of the program, the guys that have stayed, one guy left and came back. If you were going to show somebody a crystal ball at that point, tell them about, where this program would be now in July, I don't think they'd believe you. And, this is a question that I'm not going to ask. And I think it's a crazy question. But hypothetically, let's say you have a choice between Nick Saban and Kelly DeBoer, knowing what we know now. For this new 12-team playoff, knowing that Nick Saban's probably going to hang it up soon either way. If you go up to somebody and say, hey, hang it up in 2-3 years into this 12-team playoff and, Nick Saban goes out on whatever, or he goes out with an excellent group, a great season, you bring in a new coach for this new playoff model, for this new conference, for new NIL era, et cetera, and things go well to start, I think most people probably take that. It's not to say we wouldn't want Nick Saban to be the head coach of this football team, but I think knowing what we know now, and understanding where the game is now and where it's going to continue to trend, I think you feel so confident as an Alabama fan with the steady, professional, nuanced head coach in Kelly and DeBoer. And, you know, as far as this season goes, tough schedule for everybody. I think Alabama, our guy Andy Staples said it yesterday, maybe has not one of the easier schedules of the big dogs in the SEC, but this path isn't necessarily, a gauntlet the whole way through. So
sure.
You feel good. I think you feel really, that's a very long-winded way to say.
No, I love it. I love it.
You feel good right now.
I think when you look at, I think you said it perfectly. The question was, can and will he recruit? Long way to go till signing day. We'll see what this class ends up being when pen meets paper. But right now, I think the floor is pretty high for what they're going to be. And the answer so far is like, yeah, he can recruit. Yeah, he can recruit. And that Bama brand, that Bama logo probably doesn't hurt things either. But, yeah, it's the hypothetical you laid out is a fascinating one.
Well,
it's a
question
fascinating one.
What was your biggest concern, JD, for Kelly and DeBoer when he took over this program?
It was recruiting. And I think there's probably also in the back of my mind a little bit, I'm like, okay, the SEC is a different beast. 104-12 doesn't happen by accident. I'm sure he's a tremendous football coach. We've seen him be a tremendous football coach. What is the external noise impact on a one Kelly DeBoer? That's probably a little bit unfair to ask that question as we sit here in July, to levy on him right now, but it'll be a determining factor, I think, long-term success.
Well, and he hasn't gotten on any bulls yet. He hasn't done any rotating videos, so
sure.
That's a huge plus.
Yeah.
Now that we're 7 months into this, and we, from all accounts, can tell that he can recruit at a pretty high level, what is now your biggest concern for Kelly DeBoer as he gets set to start this first season?
I think my concern is what happens when and if Alabama underachieves. Now, what does underachieving look like? 9-3, 10-2 is underachieving at Bama, which is, ridiculous. But when that happens, like handling the kickback from a fan base like an Alabama who is diehard, passionate as it comes in college football, handling that kind of kickback will be a very different thing than he's ever experienced before. I'm not telling you he can't handle it. I think he probably can based on the makeup of who he is from what we can tell so far in the very, very short time of him in Tuscaloosa. But that's something where it's like, okay, how do you respond when the water gets a little bit hotter? I think he'll be fine, but that is one thing where I'm like, that will be a determining variable for success to some degree.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think we were 1-1 with Alabama last year. So if we are around them, I don't think we're a good luck or bad luck charm. But I'm so excited whether we're there, whether we're not, to see what's going to go on here. And good to see Alabama yesterday.
Good to see him, man.
Brought a good group of veterans at this point.
Yeah.
Now too, so
a lot of well-spoken cats from Malachi Moore, Tyler Booker, Jalen Milroe, like faces of the franchise kind of guys that probably no-brainers when you were picking up the lineup for the SEC Media Days crew, probably.
I'd say, pros at that. And now darn near actual professionals playing the game.
Actually. And the fits reflected as much. Speaking of pros and guys, man, we sat down with Florida Gators quarterback Graham Mertz yesterday, and we did a lot of interviews so far on Radio Row. We don't have plans to be done, have a few more lined up for today. We'll see if we can persuade some SIDs into giving us a little time with these guys. But Graham Mertz, man, I left this conversation so impressed by just how he carries himself. Like, he's a quarterback for the University of Florida, obviously, but he carries himself like an NFL quarterback. He's done the media car wash thing before from his days at Wisconsin. Another guy who's been through some adversity, had a lot of things said about him from his days at Wisconsin. Quite frankly, coming to Florida, a lot of folks in the SEC were like, are you sure that's the guy you want? You sure that guy who had interception issues in Madison, Wisconsin, the guy you want to turn this thing around, Billy Napier? Last year, he was phenomenal. 20 touchdowns with 3 picks, darn near 3,000 yards. I thought he was a really cool customer in some big moments. You hate that he wasn't able to be healthy the entirety of the season. Otherwise, they probably beat Missouri and make a bowl game. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. But enough of me talking about this. Here's our discussion and our conversation with the man that is the University of Florida quarterback, Graham Mertz. Here with Florida quarterback Graham Mertz at SEC Media Days. Graham, you are a seasoned veteran in this space. You mentioned from your time at Big Ten Media Days. How does it compare now being at SEC Media Days for you?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I mean, I think they keep you busy all day.
Sure.
Running around, like a sheep just getting herded all over the place. So it's good though. It's good. It's good to see the amount of passion that no brainer.
Sure.
SEC passion. That's kind of been my theme all day. Like,
Sure.
what's the big difference? I mean, football is football, but the passion from school to school is strong.
It just means more.
It just means more.
There you go, man.
It just means more.
And what was that
What does it say?
transition
Right
like?
there,
Yeah, it's right
bang.
behind us. Right behind us. You can see. How about the awareness by Graham Mertz there? Checking
Yeah.
out where the It Just Means More sign is. Speaking of awareness, College Football 25. We talked before you got on the air here. You're a college football sicko, like from day one, even before you were playing college ball. Have you had a chance to play the game yet? And are you
know
satisfied with your rating?
So, yes, I played the game twice. I played the game. We had a little team event.
Nice.
And I just got done playing Danny Warfel in the back room.
How was that?
Beat him 14-6. He ran it every play.
Interesting.
Yep. He didn't know. Well, it was his first time playing. I haven't played video games in a while, so I'm getting back into the flow of it.
Fair.
I'm about to have to put the controllers up in about a week and a half.
Sure.
But it's fun, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up playing it, played it with my dad. Like, we'd get home, he'd make dinner, we'd go on the game and play 2 games, and like that's how I grew up.
Sure.
Like, we were talking, like, I just grew up a fan of college football, like back in the days where I think I had I don't even know when the first year was of it, but I had it all the way up to 14. I had 14 in my dorm room my freshman year
Yes,
of
sir.
college. I was playing in there, a little road to glory. But it's a blessing that it came back.
It's incredible,
And
man.
I got to figure out a way to convince my teammates to stop playing it when the season comes around.
Sure.
Just to get back into it. But no, it's a good thing for college football.
100%, man. What's it been like going into this season? Because hearing Coach Napier at the podium talking about the way y'all have attacked the work and just kind of the edge this team has, describe that from a locker room point of view and for you being one of the leaders of that locker room.
Yeah, I think we got a special group. And I think there's power in a group of people coming together, not really caring what anybody thinks. We know what we got in that room. We trust each other. We love each other. We all went through a very hard time together. I mean, you end the season, you lose 5 games in a row. Like, that's hard stuff, especially in today's day and age in college football. So I think you got a group of guys where you got young guys coming back that maybe it was their first time playing last year. And now they have that newfound sense of urgency on how I got to prepare my body, my mind with the playbook, everything for the season when it comes. So they've been doing that since January. And then I think we had, someone said 13, I think it's 13 transfers came in, and it's a strong 13. It's 13 guys that know what it takes to win. They care about the team. They're great leaders. And, I mean, they came in, hit the ground running, and they've been rolling ever since. So it's a fun team to be a part of right now. It's a really fun team.
I got to ask you this because you mentioned kind of the end of the season and going through hard things. Is there a feel within the team that, like, hey, maybe a little bit disrespected? Like, there's a lot of noise on the outside, and everybody gets social media is what I say, that everybody can have a Twitter account. Is there a disrespected feel in Gainesville right now?
I mean, the thing is, you are what your record says the year before. We went 5-7, and that's what we were. We were not a fundamentally sound football team. We didn't execute in certain games, and that's why we were 5-7. Like, that's our record. That's what we were. But that's not what we are right now. And that's the thing where, like, people can write the story as much as you want, but the ball is going to be put down. It's going to be put down on the grass, and there's going to be ball games played. And then that's when, as a team, you have the opportunity to write your own story. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like, yeah, that's what we were, but that's not what we are. And I think that's one thing that Gator Nation, they're very passionate, and everybody just wants to win. I think that's what it comes down to. Like, you compete at this game, you play this game to win football games. And I love I got a question today. It was like, what's your expectation for your record this year? And I was like, kind of stopped for a second. I'm like, if you play this game, you want to win every game.
Of course.
And I'm like, I don't think that's like any quarterback, any person that plays on a team here today, that's how they're thinking. So I think you go into the year with that mindset if you're a true competitor. So that was fun today. I was like, I don't want to lose
That's
at all.
That's a tough question.
I don't
right
want to lose
there,
at all.
man. Yeah, I mean, that's like if you say even 11-1. I'd go like,
so what game are you going to lose?
Loss you want to have? Yeah, that's tough, man. What do you wish people knew about Graham Mertz, man?
My whole team would just be like, he's a goofball. Like, I think growing up with 2 older sisters, I was always the young, kind of squirrely one. I just care about people. Care about how every interaction I have with somebody. I love life. I have fun doing what I'm doing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
That's a great answer, man. Now
I can juggle.
You can juggle.
I can fully juggle.
Like 3 objects at a
I
time?
can do 3, 2,
like...
4.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like that'll come up in like the NFL draft stuff, like when they sit you down and say, what's your hidden talent?
I'll do it before games.
No kidding. Why? Just like hand-eye stuff?
Hand-eye, yeah.
No kidding.
It's like I started, okay. Story time, everybody. Everybody that's watching.
Yeah.
5th grade, I had a social studies teacher. His name was Mr. Hastings. The first 15 minutes of every class, we would juggle. And if you didn't drop them, you'd keep going. And then you wouldn't have to do class that day because everybody was counting your reps. So that's where we would just keep repping out juggling for the entire class. And it got to like the end of the semester, and he was like, all right, we got to have class. So that's where I started juggling.
Graham Mertz, certified athlete.
That's
what's up, man. That's what's up. I got a question for you here. A big talking point across media days, everyone's, people like me have a microphone and we do lists and we do rankings, and a big talking point is like, hey, who's the best quarterback in the SEC? Unbiased, where would you put yourself?
Unbiased? Man, I spent a lot of time with a lot of those guys, and it's a fun group, but unbiased, I don't know. People can put me wherever they want, but I think that as a quarterback, you got to have the confidence that you're the best one out there, and that's kind of where I think. But I'm not gonna go out there and be like, I'm number one.
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
So, but I think that the cool thing, you think about the entire SEC, just all the quarterbacks, like, it's just they're good guys. Like, I don't know if you've been able to talk to. I mean, I'm sure
couple of them,
you've talked to a lot
sure,
of them, like in the past couple of days, but they're just good guys. Like, they like playing pool, they like chilling, they like throwing the football around. I'm not a big fisher or hunter, but there's a lot of them. So I think in the end, it's just like they're just good humans.
But can they juggle? I don't know.
But they can't juggle.
I'm not sure. Last question here. Who is the most football dude on Florida's roster? You know when I say football dude, like
football
like
guy.
Eats smelling salts or something crazy like that, or like headbutts. I don't think you should eat smelling salts for anyone watching. I think that's
all right. I got one for you.
Yeah, hit me with it. And tell me
so
why,
we got a
too.
few football guys,
Hit me with it.
but the number one definition of a football guy, Joey Slackman. This guy comes from Penn.
Yeah.
You open his locker up, he's got 3 different smelling salts. He'll go Friday mornings, like it's just a Friday morning and we're squatting. But that's like, all right, identity of our team is we squat low and we squat powerful.
Yeah.
Joey will walk in like the only person with like the full Rambo eye black headband on, like just loves the work. And yeah, he is a football guy.
That fires me up. Ivy League, we're out here.
Ivy
we're out
League.
here, baby.
Yeah, he's SEC now.
Let's go.
He's SEC. He's big time. He's SEC.
Let's go. Graham Mertz, quarterback for Florida, juggler, football sicko. Man, we appreciate your time so much.
Thanks,
that
was fun.
How about that, man? Joey that honestly fired me up the most out of the entire interview. Joey Slackman from Penn, baby. Ivy League, we're out here. All right. So I understand there's a lot of pinkies up out there going on in the Northeast. I understand that. Within that conference, man, a lot of football guys. Joey Slackman carrying the flag for all of us. So Graham Mertz is a dog, as you have now seen from that interview. But I think there needs to be a little bit more discussion about Florida to begin with, which is funny to say because there was a lot of discussion about Florida really since the season ended last year. And a lot of discussion is going on around him and his job security, him being Billy Napier. So he was asked yesterday more or less about his job security. And the way that he answered that question raised a lot of eyebrows. He said, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but the key phrase he said is, we are on schedule to some degree. A lot of folks heard that, especially in Gainesville, and they were like, we're on schedule. We're on schedule, William. We're on schedule. We went 5-7 last year in year 2. Are you sure we're on schedule? And that's a fair reaction to have. That's a fair response to have, but I think there's more to that than what meets the eye. I'll flip this question on its head a little bit. What's he supposed to say in that situation? What's he supposed to say when asked about his job security? Yep, I'm a little bit nervous. No, you don't say that. You don't say it when it's a talking festival and you're supposed to just give the people more ammunition. No, of course you don't say that. You put on confidence, whether it's real or not. And I think, to be clear, I think it was real from Billy Napier. And you keep on pushing forward. That's all you can do in this situation. I do think it's also worth noting that on schedule for a fan base can be very different than what's on schedule going on internally. And I don't even think I'm playing devil's advocate here to sort of make this statement. Like, when Billy Napier got there, things were not good. That is obvious. When things are not good, it takes some time to turn them around. And Billy Napier said that as well. So to be on schedule from a wins-loss perspective could be very different than what Billy Napier is referring to. I think what he was referring to is being on schedule to what they do in-house. And I've made this comp for a lot of teams over the years, Texas being the most recent. When you are trying to turn things around and you're trying to do things the right way, whether it be in college football or in life, there's growing pains. When you're trying to get in shape for the first time after eating junk food and never exercising, that first lift that you do, that first week of eating meals, you feel sick. Why? Because your body is going through intense change. You're trying to do things the right way for the first time in I don't know how long. That's Florida right now. There is growing pains. And so just for him saying we're on schedule doesn't mean he's speaking to 5 and 7. I think he's speaking to we're on schedule with our progress in how we attack the work, how we do things in-house, how we are attention to detail, how we are culturally approaching this thing. Now, the reality is, for us as the college football public, we're not privy to what's actually going on in-house. We get a peek in the window. We don't actually get to see the whole living room and what's going on at Florida. And so we're kind of, to a degree, taking Billy Napier's word for it, but Graham Mertz echoed the same sentiment. And his SEC media days, what are they supposed to say? I get all that, but I do think that maybe that should be a little more encouraging if you're a Florida fan than pointing to their wins-loss column and saying, well, on schedule does not look like they're on schedule. My first thought when I heard him say we're on schedule to some degree, I was like, okay, well, what's the schedule built to do? Because the schedule is supposed to get you to some end result, right? Like your schedule for a Saturday usually builds up to what you're doing that night. I got the schedule of to-dos, and then on the very end of that thing at 5 o'clock, we're having a nice dinner with the family. It's going to be great. That's the schedule. What's the schedule for Billy Napier amounting to? Remains to be seen. But again, this whole deal here at SEC Media Days, I love it because it means college football's almost here. We love it as the college football public because we get to hear from these guys talking about the 2024 season and not about spring ball and the portal and all of that. Though some of that probably is baked into the answers they give you. What's he supposed to say? Like this situation, this whole apparatus that is SEC Media Days isn't built for a coach that's in the middle of some growing pains and trying to get things on the rails. You're kind of trying to put your best foot forward and just hunker down until the season gets here. I will say this, talking about being on schedule from a wins-loss perspective, last year, I said it many times, you won 6 games in 2022. In 2023, let's see progress. Let's see 7 wins. And it's easy to piece back the schedule, hindsight's 2020. You stole South Carolina, no way around that. But in terms of games that if you're a Florida fan, you feel like you probably should have won, Arkansas probably should have won that game. The game against Missouri, 4th and 17, your starting quarterback goes down. Like you probably should have won that game. The game against Florida State, they're playing a backup quarterback. Probably at certain points felt like you should have won that game. And so all I'm trying to say here is I think if you're splitting hairs here, a couple of plays make the difference between on schedule actually being true from a wins-loss perspective. But again, I think Billy Napier is speaking to the internal ongoings at Florida and what that schedule looks like. I'll say it again, man. This is not built from Billy Napier. This being SEC Media Days. This is not a situation that you are probably walking into with a ton of excitement because there's going to be a lot of talking. All there has been is talking since the season ended. You need week 1 to get here. You need Miami to roll into the swamp and to actually have the ball be set down and played. That is what it's about for Florida right now. That's the only remedy for anything to be positive for them. And I'm not saying they can't put positive things out there on the social media page or they can't say positive things at the press conference, but the things that will really turn the tide and really turn momentum around is winning football games. They have a good chance to do that week 1 against Miami. Now, here's the one more thing I want to say. There's a lot of assuming with Florida in 2024. One reason why we've said for a long time now we think that the narrative around them is incorrect. Over-under win totals 4.5. The schedule is just absolutely ridiculous. The schedule I would not wish on my worst enemy. Let's look at November explicitly, though. Are we sure that all of these teams that they have in November are going to be as good as they're cracked up to be. Now, Georgia's Georgia. All right, so Georgia, probably subtract them from the equation. You're at Texas. What do they look like late in the season? I think Texas is one of the best rosters and teams in college football. I love what they have at quarterback is Steve Sarkisian. How beat up are they from the SEC? Because at that point, you've played quite a few conference games. How are they holding up? I think they'll be good, but how are they holding up? I think that's a fair question. LSU, is the defense fixed? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. They got to go, I believe, to Florida in that game. Ole Miss, is that transfer portal thing working how you want it to work? Again, right now, we're assuming all these teams are going to be pretty solid. Is that still the case in November? Because remember, last year, too, we also assumed that Eli Drinkwitz was on the hot seat. Fast forward the tape. Won 10 football games, beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. What's Florida State that last game? When you go to Tallahassee. 83rd in returning production. That stat has been well documented. DJU, the new man behind center for them in Tallahassee. I like him, but is he going to be able to answer the bell? I'm just saying here, as tough as this schedule is, how it looks in July and how it looks in November could be two very different things. So on schedule, I get why it raised some eyebrows. I'm not telling you you're wrong for having the reaction that you did if you're a Florida fan, but I think you talk about being on schedule as the head coach at Florida a little bit differently than you would as a college football fan. Trey, did that raise eyebrows for you, talking about Billy Napier and Florida being on schedule to some degree? On schedule is just kind of maybe not the phrase you would put to it, but I don't think it's too crazy. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at very first, of course, JD, this was something that you say, okay, that's just not realistic. I mean, that's what are you talking about? Are you even watching your program play their games? But then, you just said it, JD. What's he supposed to say, right? So I think once you you look into these programs a little bit, you think into the mind of a head coach. That is exactly what I think we should have been expecting. People want answers when they're not winning, right? What's going on? Or are they feeling the heat? Do they feel the pressure? Like, are things going to change this year? And we're not going to find that out until September, October, November, December, maybe plus. Probably not for Florida this year, but maybe just maybe. And so, while it would be great for him to come here to Dallas and say, well, we started doing this year. We hired this guy and we changed this and I'm going to do this. And he did a lot of that too. I don't think that does much for anybody because that means nothing right now. It just doesn't. This is, our talking season still.
Sure.
This is like the Super Bowl of talking season. So, there's only so much you can do with lip service, right, JD? I think he understands that. I think he knows if you were to really sit him down, give him some truth serum, put him on a lie detector test. We weren't very good last year. We're nervous. I'm nervous about my job and what's going to happen this upcoming season. And, while I think Florida's schedule is brutal, so much is going to change. And we're going to talk about, what's going to happen this year to close out our show today. But you said it, JD. What was he supposed to say?
It really is a no-win situation for anybody. You ask the question because you're supposed to ask the question. You have to ask the question. It's a talking point right now around Florida. If you're Billy Napier, however you answer that, whether you say, yeah, I'm shook, or you say, no, we're good, I mean, people are going to have intense opinions either way. And so it's one of those things where, again, no-win situation. They need week one to get here. They just need week one to get here, is my opinion.
Desperately. It'd be fun to think about alternative answers to that question if he was going to, give us what we wanted. Well, I think we're toast, guys. I think we're in trouble as a program right now.
What if he flips it and says, what do you think? What do you think about my jobs? What if he just puts it back on them and says, or he says, what do you mean by that?
A true Jim Harbaugh kind of answer.
Yeah.
The case. Or
he just answers a different question. Like Jim Harbaugh. When he was getting all the Connor Stallions questions, he just says, yeah, we're excited for this week. He just didn't. Coach, what do you think about Connor Stallions? Are you guys worried about that? We're excited for this week. It's going to be a great week. Guys are re-energized. I'm happy to be here. And it's just like
ultimate deflector, Jim Harbaugh, which, it's crazy you say that, JD. That was not long ago, and we haven't even played the next season yet. I feel like most people have completely forgot about Connor Stallions.
They've just moved on. They've moved on.
Yeah.
Crazy how that works, man. It's I think I heard, not to get too off track here, I think I heard Drake say this in an interview. His mom gave him some advice about how to handle like bad PR or something like that. It's like, hey, if something bad happens to you or you say something that people are up in arms about, give it 72 hours. In 24 hours, people won't really remember it. In 48 hours, they will have forgotten about it. In 72 hours, someone will have said something else that makes news. I don't know if that's true for college football. but maybe there's a kernel of truth to be taken from that.
Shocked it took to Thursday to get a Drake reference out of JD.
Yeah,
and
man.
he would know too. I mean, who's had a worse calendar year, Connor Stallions or Drake?
To be fair, Drake and the 72-hour rule has not held true right now. Just if we're going
he's
so
just
maybe
putting
that's
that out
bad
there
advice.
To try to convince people.
Maybe that's
the
bad
case.
advice.
We're
I don't
not gonna
know.
forget this, Drake.
I don't know. Well, let's wrap the show up here. In the spirit of narrative season, what's not being said right now in college football? What's not being said in the SEC? Now, Trey and I were talking during the Graham Mertz interview. There's a couple of reasons as to why things aren't being said. This will make more sense as we dive more into it. But if something's not being said, one, it's probably not going to happen. So people are saying that's not going to happen. I'm not going to talk about it. The other thing that may be worth noting about topics that are not getting as much traction or airtime is, hey, sometimes going against the grain, sometimes swimming upstream, kind of salmon protocol, that's sometimes the best way forward when you try to break down the 2024 season. So maybe just a couple of things that we believe should get some more traction, maybe aren't being said near enough as we head into 2024. Arkansas, their SEC Media Days today. I don't know that Arkansas is going to be a 10-win football team. That would shock me in a lot of ways, but I do think that Arkansas bears some resemblance, minor nonetheless, bears some resemblance to Missouri of last season. Because last season, Eli Drinkwitz was sitting down at SEC Media Days and kind of a similar situation to where Sam Pittman is right now and saying is maybe not quite as morbid of a talking point around him, but there was question around like, hey, is he going to be the guy at Missouri long-term? Is he coaching for his job this year? A lot of people felt like he was on the hot seat. People feel the same way about Sam Pittman right now. And I think he'll address it head on here at SEC Media Days. And Andy Staples kind of echoed that same sentiment that he thinks he'll talk about it. But like, there is nothing more dangerous in life or in college football than someone with nothing to lose. Like Sam Pittman, if he's going down swinging. You hired a new OC in Bobby Petrino, who's had a lot of success throughout his career. You went out and got an avatar to play quarterback for you in Taylor Green from Boise State, who's 6'6", 223 pounds, and just jumps over people for fun. So you got that at quarterback. I'm just saying, I don't know that they're going to be a team that makes it to the Cotton Bowl and makes as much noise as Missouri last year, but there's some variance and some similarities between those two programs when you compare them year over year. Mississippi State. I'm not picking them to win the SEC. I've probably said that about 4 or 5 teams throughout this show, so I apologize. We'll tell you who we are picking to win the SEC here pretty soon. But Mississippi State, they got Blake Shapen from Baylor. It's not being talked about nearly enough that they may have gotten the perfect quarterback for Jeff Lebby's system. Like, if you've known anything about Jeff Lebby, it's a wide-open offense. We're going to make you cover every single blade of grass. I believe Blake Shapen said yesterday at Media Days, even if we don't have superior personnel, I'm paraphrasing here, we're going to beat you by making you have to align to us. And if you're misaligned, we're going to make you pay. I've told this story many times, but I was in the building when Baylor played Oklahoma State for the Big 12 championship game. Gary Bohannon, starting quarterback at Baylor, can't go. Blake Shapen walks out there in the biggest moment of his career, poise coming out of his ears, just starts balling. Guy can deal the pill like a shady pharmacist. We'll say that much. So I love that from Mississippi State. A bowl win for them, to me, is what equates to success. Get to 7 wins, take some momentum on the recruiting trail, hit the portal, get some weapons for Blake Shapen, and let's keep a good thing going. Or whoever the quarterback is next year from Mississippi State, I guess is a better way to put it. But Mississippi State, they got the perfect quarterback for their system right now. I love that. Here's kind of a more of a what if than a what's not being said nearly enough. But like, everyone talks about how good Nico Iamaleava could be and probably will be at Tennessee long term. What if in 2024 Nico Iamaleava is, statistically speaking, the best quarterback in the conference? Now, Trey and I were talking about this before. Jaden Daniels was statistically the best quarterback in the SEC last season, I believe, and LSU went 9-3. But I'd be surprised if Tennessee had a 100 and something ranked total defense in college football. So I'll leave that there. The point I'm trying to make here is, if Nico hits the way that I think a lot of folks believe he could hit, is Tennessee getting to Atlanta? I don't think it's irresponsible to assume so. Now, the path ahead of them isn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that with how talented Nico is, it might be worth the thought that if he hits the ground running, and we've said that a lot of times, that if he hits the ground running to where he walks out there, he's 5-star Nico right away, like, Tennessee could very easily be a team that plays in Atlanta and makes the college football playoff. That's a massive if for a first-year starting quarterback, but as highly touted as he was coming out of high school, being the #1 ranked recruit, period, in the class 2023, worth a note. I think it's worth keeping an eye on. One more I want to talk about here that's not getting enough love and maybe not getting talked about enough here. What's not being said is Kentucky, if 10-2 is the threshold to making the college football playoff. Mark Stoops, every third year or so, pops for a 10-win season or in that neighborhood at least. This is that third year right now for Coach Stoops. The Stars, in a lot of ways, feel like they're kind of aligning for Kentucky. So I'm not calling my shot for Kentucky to be a college football playoff team, but I think it deserves maybe a little bit more attention. With Dane Key and Barry and Brown, two of the best young receivers, two of the most explosive receivers in the sport. Brock Vandergriff, a five-star quarterback transferring over from Georgia with a lot of ability that pushed Carson Beck for that job a season ago in Athens. The draw isn't horrible for them either. They're at Ole Miss, Auburn, at Tennessee are all tricky, but Georgia and Texas are the two that you really circle as, being the most difficult from a roster talent perspective to deal with. But if those are your two losses, Georgia and Texas, two of the best teams in college football, I'm just going to say quality losses is a word you hear a lot around Kentucky if they get to that 10-2 threshold, and I think that could make them a college football playoff backdoor kind of team. So this isn't us calling our shot, but just in the spirit of narrative season, the big narratives get all the talk, and that's fine, but just maybe keep a side eye, keep a peripheral view on some of these different things going on in the conference, because I think that it's worth us discussing a little bit more as we move into the college football season. Trey, last year, man, there was a lot of things that we did not see coming. South Carolina having a letdown, Missouri popping for double-digit wins, LSU having the best offense in college football. We talked about that actually a little bit this time last year at Media Days. I don't think we predicted it by any stretch of the imagination, but anything that comes to mind for you or any other thoughts on the maybe things that aren't being said in the sport right now?
Something is going to happen that we're not planning on right now, JD.
Yep.
That's the nature of sports in general. So, if I had to pick one, I don't want to take just a random stab at it. Texas winning the SEC. I don't think they're going to be our favorite today as the media polls. I think that would probably be a surprise to some people. And I think for me, that's I just see that coming. I don't know. That's been my one narrative that I want to run with this week. So if we're talking about what's not being said, I think a year one SEC championship for Texas would be the one thing. Maybe that is being said though. So I don't know if that's in depth enough there for you, but no, it's this is July, JD. It's like the NCAA tournament. Everybody fills out their bracket, right? And we're sitting there thinking, okay, well, if we take the projectile on this, and if we do the math on this team, and how many points did they, whatever, and you can try to predict things as much as you can with math and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, players make plays, and when that first ball is kicked off in late August, everything could change like that. And we're gonna, I think, read too deeply as we always do. Miami, Florida, whoever wins that game, if it's Florida, oh my God, wow, Florida's back and Billy's saved and Graham's it. And if they lose that game, okay, well, he's gonna be fired by week 2 or 3. I think this year Missouri, or I guess this year's Missouri could be Arkansas. Maybe it's South Carolina. They were a disappointment this past year.
Mm-hmm.
We had high hopes for a team that really let everybody down. They have a great young quarterback. They have great young skill players like NYC Harbor, our guy, and Dylan Stewart, huge power on the defensive side now too. Maybe they're your Missouri this year. Overall, JD, I think that this SEC is so much fun, not just because of all the nuances, 12-team playoff and NIL and more parity in general, but the fact that, we don't have Nick Saban anymore in this conference. And, we haven't seen Georgia win an SEC title. We've seen them win, one in the last 27 years. So who knows if they are, next in line for being that SEC dynasty. But we just have so much parity, so much quality across this conference. This is going to be a whole new game I think we're looking at this year, JD, and I'm just excited, man.
I have two thoughts. One, I am almost disappointed in myself for not making the comp between South Carolina and Missouri as opposed to an Arkansas and Missouri, because I think what you said about Nick Harbor, special player, Lenore Sellers, special player. Burden? Is he Luther Burden? Yeah, that's kind of the big question, which is that's a tough comp. South Carolina's schedule is brutal. So maybe that's why you feel okay about Arkansas. But either way, both of those schools are ones that we have to watch. I love that comp in South Carolina and Missouri. I love that a lot. Second thought, I believe with us being here at Media Days, I think everyone on Radio Row will get a vote for who's going to win the SEC. Yes. Will your vote, and feel free to say, I'm not going to answer that right now, will your vote be Texas to win the SEC? Wow.
No questions.
No hesitation.
It's Texas to win the SEC. It's Texas to, at that point, they'll probably be a 1, 2, or 3 seed Texas to win their quarterfinal game. It's Texas to win their semifinal game. It's Texas to win the national championship this year for me, JD.
Boom. Boom.
That's my take.
Let's go, dude.
I, of course, had Nebraska winning the national championship on this very show a year ago. So,
did you say that on air? I don't know if you said that on air.
If I didn't, I should have, because that was the take. And maybe they do this year. But
I don't know that. Did you? I don't think you really were thinking that, though. Were you? Was that really the take?
No, I was. I mean, you have Matt Rule, a guy that can come in and change things quickly, and a lot of returners on both sides of the ball, and that's going to be the case this year. We're not going to go down the Nebraska rabbit hole on the last day of SEC Media Days, but we have Texas that is now a part of the SEC. We'll go down that rabbit hole. I think Texas is your national champion. I think Texas is your SEC champion.
I will say your odds to make that pick, like your pick of Texas winning the SEC and the national championship, substantially better odds than the take of Nebraska last year. Just speaking from Vegas alone.
Sure.
From Vegas alone. So
where's the value there?
That's the big question. It's a value game.
Yeah.
It is a value game. Well, Trey, man, this has been a blast. I know we got a few more things we're going to button up here on Radio Row here from a different conversations with some folks. But man, this has been awesome, dude. Thanks for holding it down. Thanks for jumping on the mic. Thanks for punching the show live. Like, you've been a absolute weapon this week, dude. So we appreciate you, man.
JD, thank you so much for having me on. I mean, this is just such a blast. So fortunate to not only be around you and get to work with you, but get to do stuff like this with you as well. And everybody else watching, today, yesterday, our coverage all the time. Our guy said it. Nick Brake, just such a good job. River Bailey, you guys support us. You guys help us continue to get to do what we do and, make this stuff great. So thank you to everybody watching, commenting, whatever the case is. And thank you, JD, for having me on the show again this week.
Of course, man. Producer Mafia holding it down in Nashville right now. Jackson Odette, River Bailey, Nick, him, heavy hitter, heavy lifter, Brake. Appreciate y'all making the show happen as well. We appreciate y'all making this show happen. Everyone tuned in that's watching right now. Everyone that's listening on podcast, man, y'all make this show go. Cannot stress enough. It's that time now. If you weren't in that mode before, and a lot of y'all that are watching right now have been in that mode since college football ended, I put in quotation marks if you're watching on YouTube or listening on podcast, in Houston when Michigan won the Natty. Need you to get back in that mode, though. Got to dial in here. No more time to miss shows. No more time to miss podcasts. It's about that time now. College football season is upon us. SEC Media Days is the reality. Let's go, man. Let's have a great year. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Next time we're back on the air, it'll be in our home studio in Nashville, Tennessee at On3 HQ, man. We will see y'all then. Going to keep this party rolling. For myself, JD Pical, and Trey Annity on the ones and twos, we will see y'all next time.